Hey folks, this is Abigail in Seattle, and I am due to put out another video. I'm at I guess about 7 months now, and I realized that the last video that I put out, while fun to some, was not as helpful as perhaps it could have been. But I did want to show that we really are having a good time here, us trans people, and and that's a component of hope, right? Because once you get through some of the challenges in this life, be it your transition or whatever it is, our goal is to be able to embrace beauty and happiness and joy as much as we can. Um, and to that, I actually, you would be proud, Abby has made a list because I do want to speak to a couple things in this video. The first is I've been participating in something called Inner Parks Work, which was the old title of it. It has a new one now that uses the word soul, but let's just use Inner Parks. And the piece of that I have been working on is that there's the idea that there's self, and that is beauty, and that is essence, and that's what can carry us forward. And then what we have what are called protectors and managers that help us through life, and sometimes not as constructively as we would like, but to overcome the negativity, we need to identify what it is that they're trying to do. And so, like, I know for me, if I am in a good place, to do my makeup, to create my look, I'm sort of shooting for a little bit of a 1940s style going, that to me can be fun, it can be beautiful, and it's like, I have a guide, I have a guide of a mature, caring woman that is helping me and guiding my hand, and things are smooth and playful. And then on a bad day, I have another part of me that's like this, like a mommy dearest, really. And she's very, very harsh and very, very critical, and nothing is good enough for her. And every time that I look at myself, what I see are my flaws. And as a trans woman, that can become very self-destructive very, very quickly, right? Because then you begin to go, oh, look, that's masculine. Oh, this is masculine. Look, that fault. Look at being testosterone affected. Look at all of this negativity that I can focus on in my face, right? Or anywhere else. And what ends up happening is that, it keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And I know that this sort of inner transphobia, inner hate is something that a lot of trans women and I think trans men have talked to me about. And so what I recognized in doing this work with this fellow, this inner parts work, was that was a manager. And really what she came about in me, in my psyche, about the time that puberty hit. Because that's when I realized that, at least at that time, that I was going to be living a male existence. That at least for the foreseeable future, I was not going to be magically transformed into a girl, even though I'd harbored that dream for a long time. And that's something else that I've learned a lot of trans women harbor, especially when they're young. We believe that we are just going to wake up one day and be the gender that we know ourselves to be. And then when puberty hits, like I talked about in the first video, we realize that that's not going to happen. And, often that leads to a point of extreme depression, anger, and anxiety, both at a biological and a psychological level. And so anyway, going back to this idea, this mommy dearest character in me, what she was trying to do was to help me in a very critical, unforgiving way to be a woman, and to do that. And it was, it was an immature side of me. But what I realized that I needed to go to in her was to say, you know what, I acknowledge you. I know where you came from. I remember that hurt and that pain. I remember being a little kid and just wishing, and I was actually thinking about this too, is that if I were looking at myself at like, an 11-year-old in my little playroom, or 8 or 9-year-old or whatever, that I would have gone to that child and hugged her and said, it's going to be okay. It's just really, really going to be okay. Enjoy. Don't hate. let go. And I realized too is that I went through that process that so much of what it carried forward in terms of my own negativity towards certain groups of people or toward religions and things like that, were as the result of those fears and of that little kid feeling condemned, condemned because he was deemed a boy and he knew herself to be a girl, and condemned because really, even at that age, I always, particularly around 11, I really, really did understand in a very romantic and sweet way that who I was in love with were women, and that it was a love between women, and that what I wanted was to be a woman in love with another woman and be appreciated as such from now on to old age. Now, I do say that I'm pansexual and I've found myself attracted to various genders, and I've found men that are nice to date, and trans men and trans women seem to me. But ultimately, the romantic, the fire that burns in me, the love, the person whose forehead I want to kiss and whose ear I want to whisper, and that is a woman, right? So, and that takes me to another thing that I harbored for a long time, which really needed to go, which was this animosity towards straight people. That's absurd. It is absurd. My mother is straight. She's one of my great supporters. My sister is straight. Last night, I was in a room full of beautiful straight people, and we were doing something as a collective that was good for all of us. And, I got the feeling that I really liked every single one of those 30 plus individuals in that room, and that they really liked me, and that I had something to offer them, and that they in turn had something to offer me. And if I had gone in and said, okay, straight people, they're going to hate me. They're going to hate me because I'm trans. They're going to hate me because I really do lesbian identify. What I would have done is build up this box and this barrier yet again and leave myself closed off to building these relationships, which ultimately, as a friend of mine pointed out, is that ultimately most of the relationships in this life that we're going to have ideally are one of sisterhood and brotherhood. And that has nothing to do with sexual orientation or really even so much gender. It's a spiritual connection. And it's about building bridges so that we can form that spiritual connection, and letting go of our prejudices and letting go of our hurts and our defense mechanisms. And that to me is self-mastery, is to the point of being able to see beauty and to see love in most people, and even in those that perhaps are acting in an ugly way, to recognize that what they're doing is responding to a wound. Much like a lot of my negativity was in response to wounds. Things that I carried forward from the time that I was a child. And, as I'm finding peace within myself, and as Abby becomes a 40-year-old woman in this life, now is the time to let that positivity radiate, Those that are going to continue to be negative, I have to accept and tolerate, but I am going to try to the best of my ability, and I know that I'll have good days and I'll have bad days, but to, by my example, show that this trans woman has just as much beauty inside of her and just as much heart to give as any other human being that I encounter. And so I think that that is going to be my goal going into 2012. I thank every one of you for watching, and I hope some part of this was useful to you. Take care. Peace.